So in response to Senator Barrasso's question on New START, I wanted to follow up a little bit. Both the United States and Russia came into compliance in February 2018, met the deadline on deployed nuclear warheads. But my impression from your dialogue was the U.S. does not yet have a position on whether to work to extend the New START agreement past 2021.
That's correct. We're very hopeful that we can achieve. We view them. They are individual agreements as a legal matter, and they can be worked on independently. But the deterrence model, the underpinnings, the framework of these nuclear agreements, they are connected. Whether they be things covered by New START, things covered by the INF Treaty, other provisions, they are of a part, and it is the case that we are, as we begin to evaluate how to approach that, we're trying to do it in a holistic way.
Thank you. I think I can anticipate that this will be something that you and your team will be working on in the year ahead, setting the groundwork for understanding the options there. Thank you. So Russia oil tankers reportedly supplied fuel to North Korea via sea transfers several times in 2017. President Trump made a reference in which he talked about saying that what China is helping us with, Russia is denting. And then he has said specifically also Russia is not helping us at all with North Korea. Did this issue of Russia bypassing the UN sanctions come up in the conversation between President Putin and President Trump?
I think I can answer that question because I believe President Trump has talked about this. In fact, Russia's commitment to help us achieve denuclearization of North Korea did come up. The two of them did discuss it. And the centrality of continuing to enforce the UN Security Council resolutions that the Russians voted for, were raised between the two of them. I heard in a subsequent meeting at which I was president, I heard Vladimir Putin reiterate his commitment to doing each of those two things.
And to follow up on your conversation with Tim Kaine about the communique from the Singapore summit and the details that need to be worked out in regard to having a survey, to just the starting point, if you will, of a detailed nuclear agreement. When you have an agreement regarding the details of how such a survey of North Korean missiles, nuclear materials, and so forth, when you have that agreement, will you brief this committee on that?
Senator, I'm sure we'll be able to share some elements of that with you. I'm hearkening back to the Iran agreement, the JCPOA, in which they provided a declaration which was knowingly false. That is, the administration knew did not reflect accurately the history of the Iranian weapons program. I promise you I won't do that. I promise you I won't lie about the contents of their declaration. If we disagree, if we think they're wrong, we will acknowledge that. I'll have to think through precisely how in the appropriate way we would share that information with you. But you have my commitment not to allow a false declaration to form a fundamental pillar of a nuclear agreement.
Well, certainly,
in the way that it did.
I'll tell you, we all had privy not just to a briefing on it, but to the actual document and details. And so we had that standard. In fact, those were made public as well. Would you expect to meet those two standards eventually?
When the agreement's complete, yes. I was thinking you were talking about sort of during the process. I believe those documents were made public at the time that the legislation was being considered and when the agreement was final. We hope to bring this agreement to Congress, and it is, of course, the case that you would need to see the underpinnings of that agreement. And part of that would be there'll probably be a series of declarations associated with that.
I'll tell you, it did bother me some that because those details haven't been worked out yet, that the President already conceded to setting aside the joint exercises with South Korea. What are the South Korean leaders briefed in advance of that announcement?
Senator, I'm going to leave that to the Department of Defense to answer. It would have been conducted in military channels.
President Trump blamed poor relations with Russia on U.S. foolishness, and I'm surprised he blamed U.S. foolishness rather than Russia annexation of Crimea, of their occupation of eastern Ukraine, of their attacks on individuals in Britain, their support of the Syrian government when the Syrian government is using barrel bombs and gas on its own people, and given that Russia's significant cyber attack on our elections, do you believe that the poor relations with Russia is a result of U.S. foolishness?
Senator, I think there are countless reasons. You identified several. I could go on about the reason that we find ourselves in this place with Vladimir Putin and his regime today. Not a good place, to be sure. A place that the president is working to develop a relationship to try and reconfigure, at least at the level of making sure these two leaders understand each other and know how each other are thinking about the problem set. I think that's important and appropriate, and I'm hopeful he can be successful in that.
It's a nice essay. It didn't answer my question, but I'll go on. The president has also said there's no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea and that we could all sleep well. Given that we don't yet have an agreement on even surveying the stockpile of what North Korea has, or an agreement on eliminating their weapons or their missiles, or an agreement on verification strategies, shouldn't we more accurately approach this from the viewpoint that there is still a nuclear threat from North Korea? The president's team is working to eliminate it, but it is still a nuclear threat as of today.
Yes, I think the president would agree that the primary systems that have threatened America continue to exist. I think what his comment was that the tension had been greatly reduced. We're at a point where it was possible that there could be a miscalculation.
I've got 20 seconds, so I wanted to ask you one last question on a completely different topic. Fortify Rights, a human rights group that traveled to Burma to document what happened at the Rohingya, came out with a report detailing devastating atrocities, which we've also seen from elsewhere. And we also have the report that Senator Brownback, our ambassador on religious freedom, is making. Is it time for the Senate to act on the sanctions against the Burmese military that we passed out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee?
I'll leave to senators to decide if it's time for the Senate to act. I can only say that the underpinnings that you described, the atrocities you described, are very real.
Well, I would say this is the type of thing where executive leadership makes a difference in giving direction to this body. And so that's why I was seeking your and the President's opinion on whether it's time to really send a strong message against such ethnic cleansing and genocide.
Thank
you. Can we expect such a leadership from the President or yourself?
I remember what Secretary Tillerson did before me on this issue. You can be sure that we will be serious and lead on this important issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. I appreciate your stamina. You've been here for quite a while. I want to let you know how much I appreciate